Hello there, friends. This is Spencer Michaud, and welcome to your weekly astrology forecast for the week of October 26th through November the 1st. Hope that you're all doing well out there. I'm recording this today on Friday, October the 23rd, as we are experiencing the first quarter moon. Um, yeah, some really interesting things I've been studying this week also. I've been On a personal note, I've started a new scheduled routine where I've been getting up earlier and making more efficient use of my time. And that's been leading to some really interesting revelations. I've been listening to these really interesting um, lectures by Robert Schmidt, who is one of the founders of Project Hindsight. It's a lecture series called Whether and Whence, and he's talking about the differences between modern astrology and Hellenistic astrology. And there's some really cool insights in there, especially with some things with the seven traditional planets and with the trans-Saturnian outer planets as well. So I want to share a little bit of those insights as we go along in the forecast today. But this week, an overview of what we've got going on for the astrology of the week. Mercury is retrograding back into the sign of Libra this week, into the third decan of Libra. We'll talk about the Four of Swords with that. Venus will be changing signs this week. Venus will be moving into her own domicile in the first decan of Libra. So we'll do kind of a bigger breakdown of Libra and what Venus means within those decanic structures. On Saturday, the 31st, October the 31st, we have our full moon with the moon opposite the sun at 8 degrees of Taurus and Scorpio, respectively. And that full moon will be conjoining Uranus. I almost said the fixed star Uranus because that's kind of how I've been thinking about them lately. But we'll kind of talk about the way that Schmidt talks about Uranus. A little insight to that, or a little preview. He thinks of it as a transcendental sun. And I thought that was very, very interesting. So I would like to explore that with you today as well. So we will also be seeing the sun making its opposition to Uranus at that full moon. So it's a very Uranian type of week. And Mercury is going to be, shifting signs and then making a square on Sunday the 1st to Saturn. A retrograde Mercury will be squaring Saturn at 26 Libra and Capricorn. The only other thing we have going on Sunday the 1st is the sun will be moving into the second decan of Scorpio. Happy Scorpio season, by the way. We are now firmly in the domicile. The sun is firmly in the domicile of Mars in the Scorpio season. And don't forget, on Sunday, November the 1st, we will be switching from daylight time or daylight savings time to standard time, or Eastern Daylight Time to Eastern Standard Time if you are on the same time zone as I am. So that happens at 2 a.m. on Sunday the 1st. So that's important to remember, especially if you're doing astrology. Okay, so let me talk a little bit about Schmidt before I get into the planetary condition report, because I thought this was man, I always learn something new when I listen to Robert Schmidt or read any of his work. I was just kind of inspired this week to throw one of his lectures on in my headphones as I was going for a walk, as I was apt to do in the months past. But since I've kind of, I don't know, I feel like since the pandemic has started, I've been a little bit less efficient with my time, and I've been exercising less because we've been going less places and things like that. But I really tried to make an effort this week. Maybe it was Venus and Virgo, trying to, beautify this or my schedule or something like that. But really tried to make an effort to write out a very detailed schedule as far as what I was doing with my time each hour of the day, and to see if I could really become more productive. And that led to me getting up earlier, doing some praying and some propitiating of the planetary deities around the planetary hour of each particular day. That's something that I've done in the past that I was kind of got away from. And as I've been reading books like Jeffrey Cornelius's Moment of Astrology, I've really started to think more about my personal relationship with the planets or the daimons. And I think that what he's really pointing out to me, Cornelius, is this participation that we have with astrology, and this kind of like Uh, and Schmidt talks about it, and Cornelius touches on this too, as the planets representing the cosmic mind. And we're trying, as astrologers, what we're doing is we're trying to second guess or read the intentions of a cosmic being or of a cosmic consciousness. And that can shift, and we can petition it, we can ask it for help. It's kind of like the power of prayer on some level. um, and that concept is really interesting to me to play with a little bit more. And I'll tell you what, when I started doing my planetary propitiations every day, I've just been very energized. I've started doing more exercise and things like that and going for more walks. Um, Really, a lot of this started when I put my phone kind of away for the day and set out a few hours of the day that where I just did not engage in social media and I didn't pick up my phone. And that's been leading to some real breakthroughs, I think, in helping me to refocus. So I would highly recommend, if you are struggling, as I did, through some of the challenges of having a regular schedule from working from home during these very challenging times that we've been going through. I really have found a lot of grace through holding myself to some kind of more structured system of time and being the one that holds myself to that standard. When we lose some of the structural elements of our day and of our time, sometimes we have to create it for ourselves. And I think that my understanding of Pluto from Robert Schmidt has been really informing this too. He thinks of Pluto as a transcendental Mercury. Think about that. And just to flesh out these trans-Saturnian planets outside of the orbit of Saturn, he thinks of Neptune as a transcendental moon. And the interplay between the sun, which he considers selection and individuation, okay, the animating spirit. I think about this as the one mind. And you can think about this in this kind of hermetic type of uh, theoretical construct with the one mind and the one thing. And we have the one thing, I think, is represented by the moon. This is what the substance that form comes into being with. So we've got the animating spirit, the consciousness that is infusing the moon, okay, is, almost like mating with the moon because they're like consorts, the king and the queen, and bringing things into existence. And we can see this with the interplay with the sun and the moon, with the ability of the reflected light of the sun that is collecting the light of spirit, the light of the sun, to bring things into form. And Schmidt was talking about Uranus as the idealized sun, the idealization of humanity, and almost like a gift from the universal mind. And that really plays with the way that Richard Tarnas thought about Uranus as the Promethean planet, a gift from the gods, right? A gift of consciousness, a gift of fire, a gift of inspiration. I think sun can be associated with inspiration as well. And Neptune, conversely, is like that dissolving quality where we're dissolving things back into that base one thing, that base matter that is devoid almost of spirit, right? The devoid of consciousness. It's the dissolving of form that was infused with spirit back to substance. And that's why we feel, I've really been expressing on this show that whenever I have Neptune contacts in my personal chart, I feel tired. I feel like the energy has been drained out of me. The spirit, maybe the animating spirit that prompts us to do things, is drained away. And that was just such a light bulb moment. And he thinks about Pluto as this intermediary, okay, Mercury, which is going back and forth and contesting between this animating spirit and this matter. Okay, this is where we have like communication, where we have a thought turning into speech or into a word or into form, or where we have like the communication between things like commerce, where we're trying to Schmidt described it as you have this form and this substance, and if you sell enough of it, you will gain rank like the sun in your community. So you're bringing your goods to the masses like the sun, and to attain some sort of like selection, okay, some sort of individuation. And Pluto is the I don't know, like the aspirational version of that. He says that these trans-Saturnian planets had this disruptive influence on the signs themselves. So they're like these other things. He's really adamant they're not sign rulers, which I agree with. That they have this disruptive element. So, I'm thinking about this week and thinking about what's going on with Saturn and Pluto, and with Pluto being in Capricorn, and Pluto being in that third decan of Capricorn. And we've been talking about this week with, and in general, we talked last week about Jupiter moving into the third decan of Capricorn. And that Capricorn decan is associated in the Thema Mundi, okay, and with the tarot, with the Four of Pentacles. And the Four of Pentacles talks about the throne of power, okay? So what we're seeing being disrupted and being called into question and being destabilized on a almost universal level are positions of power. Governments are being destabilized. Kings are being destabilized. Anybody who has authority or responsibility for others is destabilized right now. We're throwing it into question so that we can eventually infuse the new that wants to come through, right? So we're simultaneously dissolving back into the one thing, okay? This is the Plutonic transformation cycle, right? We're calling into question the substance that we created before. And then that eventually will lead to infusing what is left behind after the fermentation process with something new. And this, man, there's just so many light bulbs that are coming around with that association. And that's why this is something where Pluto isn't something to fear. It's something to embrace and to say, wow, what has outlived its purpose, and what is dissolving, and what needs to be reborn, right? But thinking about that as I don't know about higher octave, but a sort of like a supercharged impersonal Mercury, okay, or an impersonal sun with Uranus, or a universal sun, or a universal moon with Neptune. These concepts, they are more in the abstract realm. They're less like planetary wills, which are in the planetary spheres. So if you think about this, I'm going to share my screen for a minute. And we're just going to see the chart of the moment here for the week. But if you think about these in planetary spheres, you've got, and I don't want to get too far into this, but for example, I'm going to draw here. Here's the Earth, and then you have the spheres of the planets that surround it, and you had the elements here. And imagine that these planetary spheres are divided into 7. Okay, 7 wills. There's not exactly 7 there. But then we have outside of that, the realm of the fixed stars. And then outside of that, the realm of the zodiac. And each of them is more closer to divinity in the Platonic imagining of the universe. And you've got the trans-Saturnian planets somewhere kind of out here, right? Between the realm of the fixed stars and the realm of the planets. So you can think about them as like trying to interpret universal laws, which we consider with the fixed stars, like things that are, less negotiable, and trying to bring them down and bring them into the wills of the planets that express themselves here on the Earth. So that is just a little thing that I've been studying that I wanted to share, because it was just really, I was finding a lot of enthusiasm for those ideas right now. I've been making a lot of notes on this. It's really making me rethink a lot of my assumptions about astrology. I would highly recommend checking out Robert Schmidt's Weather and Whence, if you want a very good introduction to Hellenistic astrology. And you can find these lectures, I believe, they are in the archives of the Association for Young Astrologers. If you sign up to become a member, I think you get instant access to these talks. And it is worth it. I think it's like $30 a year to become a member. Then you get access to all these amazing talks that they've done in the past from people like Robert Schmidt, Demetra George, Ben Dykes, Chris Brennan. They've got all sorts of good stuff on there. So this is a good plug for that. While we're in the midst of doing some plugs, and sometimes I do them at the end of the show, but I'll do them at the beginning here. I am offering a special reading on Mercury retrograde right now, where we would go together and look at Mercury and where it is retrograding and where it is doing that Cazimi moment. I think this is another thing that I'm experiencing right now is, we're heading towards the Cazimi as I record this, and Mercury is in the underworld right now, having a moment of gnosis with the sun and being reborn. And I'm feeling that right now. I feel like I'm going back in time and reviewing something that I'd, had thought about in the past, but I'm getting a whole new perspective on it from something that was hidden. And if you want to think about what that is, how that is playing out in your particular chart, I'd be happy to walk you through that. It's an hour-long reading. I'm offering a discounted rate with that as well. It is less than my normal hourly rate, and we would look at where Mercury is positioned in your particular natal chart right now, what houses it is providing resources for as well, and what kind of gnosis you may be recovering from the underworld that will come to the light of day as Mercury emerges as a morning star when it becomes visible again in the sky. So that is listed in my Book Now link if you want to check that out. Yeah, got some it's exciting to have these new kind of like specialized readings as well. I like being able to focus on one particular part of the chart as in addition to my very detailed longer readings that I do. Sometimes we can really get into some great conversations and get into some interesting depth when we pick out one particular part and really examine it up close. Okay, plug over. Thank you for bearing with me with that. Let's talk about the planetary condition for the week. So this week, the sun is moving through the first decan of Scorpio. It will dip into the second decan at the very end of the week. It does have rulership in the second face, but for the most of the week, the sun will be peregrine. It is moving fast. It will make a exact opposition to Uranus on the 31st, which is Halloween. It will also oppose the moon that day as well. So we have a moon conjoining with Uranus on the full moon. The sun will be in the terms of Mars from 0 to 7 degrees and then move into the terms of Venus from 7 to 11 degrees. It will be co-present with a retrograde Mercury in Scorpio, making a sextile to Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn, and then sextiling Venus in Virgo before Venus moves out of Virgo and into Libra. The host of the sun this week is a retrograde Mars in Aries, which it has an aversion relationship to right now, but it does have that kind of like ingirding relationship that I've been talking about, where there is still a potentially a secret channel where Mars is able to provide resources to the sun. Let's just talk a little bit about Scorpio while we're on the sun here. Scorpio is that concept of separation. Now, Schmidt talks about Mars as the quality of separating, splitting apart that which is alike or together. Now, I've had some thoughts as I was meditating on Mars. What does Mars want to do in its diurnal temple, Aries, versus its nocturnal temple of Scorpio? Now, in the Aries cycle, okay, because this is where Mars is right now, and this is where we might be feeling some tension. Mars in Aries is the severance from the universal substance that we could talk about with almost like Neptune, right? We're severing from the mother body, the substance, so that we can individuate into a body. Look at what happens when we go from Mars to in Aries to the next sign, which is Venus in Taurus, the unification of spirit with a body. So Mars in Aries is saying, I am separating my consciousness from the universal consciousness to become an individual so that eventually I will be able to reconcile and come into union with a body. Now, what does the nocturnal Mars do? What are we severing from then? So it's the opposite. We are severing from the body that we have already come into union with, and then we are moving towards, returning to spirit, which is what we do in Sagittarius. We're trying to return to some kind of ideal, some kind of faith, some kind of pilgrimage to find, God. And this is really interesting to me because, Scorpio in the Northern Hemisphere coincides with the time of year where we're seeing decay. We're seeing the leaves fall from the tree. We're seeing the bodies returning to the earth, the process of fermentation, the composting type of Mars. So Mars has this quality of being able to both provide fermentation, right? The composting, the severing, okay? And its opposite, Venus in Taurus, is that fecundity, right? That fertile soil that is ready to give birth to form. So, very interesting. Now, what is challenging is that Mars right now is birthing things through that Aries temple and saying, I want to individuate so that I can put myself into a body eventually. Whereas the sun is basically shining the light of the mind, the consciousness, the will, the selection on the process of decay. So there may be some confusion with this, where we want to individuate and we want to say this is what I am and this is what I am not, but we're being asked to like sever from things with the sun in Scorpio and say, well, I've got to get rid of this first. So what I would say with the sun in Scorpio this week is you need to get rid of the identity or maybe even the physical forms that no longer serve you, so that you can continue that process of saying, this is who I am with Mars in Aries. This and say, this is what I'm not, and this is what I am. Okay, let's move forward to Saturn. Now, Schmidt talks about Saturn. His key words for Saturn are exile, deprivation, abandonment, casting out, orphanage, darkness. So Saturn is in Capricorn this week, moving from 25 to 26 degrees of Capricorn. So wherever Saturn is moving, now it's in its own domicile, it's in its own terms from 22 to 26 degrees. It will move into the terms of Mars from 26 to 30 degrees. It's moving fast. Okay. It's co-present with Jupiter. It is making the overcoming square to Mars in Aries, sextiling the Sun and Mercury in Scorpio, and making a trine to Venus in Virgo. It will then move into a square relationship with Mercury and Venus once they move into Libra at the beginning of the week on Tuesday. It's its own host, right? So it's got all of its own resources. It's drawing upon all of those resources of exile, deprivation, abandonment, casting out. And we have to think about this as different from Mars. Okay, malefic planets bring hardship generally, but it's a different type of hardship. Okay, he was talking about Mars as severing and separating that which was together. Okay, think about this is a topic that's been in the news. Mars is associated with abortion, right? You're severing the baby from a body, whereas Saturn is associated with orphans, where you are abandoning something that existed and casting it out. So what do we think about with Saturn right now? Saturn's very strong. We are all feeling abandoned, cast out, okay, with social distancing, right? We're all feeling deprived of light. Saturn is the opposite of the sun in the Thema Mundi. Saturn was the opposite of the moon in the Thema Mundi, in Capricorn in particular. What are we deprived of right now? Lunar community. The moon, according to Schmidt, is the city. The moon is the community. It is what we share. It is collecting something. So with Saturn in that particular position, we are being deprived of our communities, right? Because it is opposite that domicile of the moon, right? Yeah, and this is really something that is clicking a lot of boxes away from me right now. So what happens when we move into Aquarius? When Saturn moves into Aquarius, it'll be opposite the domicile of the sun. We will be deprived of individuality. See what I'm saying? We will have a difficulty finding our own individual voices amongst this collective, right? We will be feeling a difficulty through just feeling homogenized, feeling like we don't have an identity. And these are all these are all Aquarian type of themes too. Is the, when the sun is in Aquarius, it is in its exile. It is difficult for the sun to become individuated, and because it is being fed by Saturn, because it is being fed by deprivation. So think about that this week as we are moving towards Saturn in Aquarius. We may be deprived of our communities right now, but think about how we are going to endure that lack. Okay, we are finding strength through endurance. That's why we say Saturn is associated with an endurance in modern astrology, or even you could extrapolate that out into the traditional astrology as well. Because the circumstances that Saturn brings you is deprivation, you have to endure something through your own willpower, right? Think about Saturn in your own chart. That is, wherever Saturn is placed in your own chart is a place that you've been deprived, and you've been and you've been asked to endure lack. And over time, you may have built the quality of being able through a long period of time. You may have been able to, you built in the quality of being able to find that, but through endurance, through hard work, through deprivation, you may have been able to incorporate that quality into your life, but it didn't come easy, right? I have Saturn in the third decan of Virgo, a decan associated with understanding the passage of time and what stays and what goes, and leaving a legacy, and thinking about, thinking about form, and how are you going to separate out what is useful and what isn't, okay? And it's been a lifelong journey for me to decide what is useful in my life and what it needs to be let go of. I had difficulty letting go of things as a young person. I would hang on to everything. I would hang on to old mail. I would hang on to old documents. I would hang on to, you name it. I was a class A hoarder, right? And some of that can be attributed to having a very strong moon in my chart and having the sun in Cancer. I think those are all contributing factors. But Saturn was saying, hey, you need to learn the ability to sift out what is actually practical and what isn't. And that ability was denied to me. Okay. And I was even separated from that ability because I have Mars and Saturn in that particular decan. Okay. So it's equally important that I learn that quality of life, that I learn how to differentiate between what is of use and what isn't, what form needs to be given back to the earth and what needs to be passed on as a legacy. And it'll only come through the cultivation of my character, not through it necessarily coming easy to me. So I think about that with malefic planets in your chart. these things aren't going to come easy to you. That doesn't mean you can't develop those things in your character. It just means that you will develop them through challenging circumstances. Okay, let's move forward to Jupiter. Now, Jupiter is in the third decan of Capricorn this week, moving from 20 to 21 degrees, moving fast. It is still in its fall, since it is in the domicile of Saturn, where it's very uncomfortable. It is at the bottom of the wheel of fortune. It is depressed. It's difficult for Jupiter to bring something to confirm things. Okay, this is what Schmidt talks about Jupiter as confirmation. It stabilizes things. It's a bridge builder. It is associated with friendship. And here's something really surprising. He talks about the diurnal planets, Jupiter, Saturn, and the Sun, as personal ones because of the Sun's ability to be of a selecting quality, whereas Venus, Mars, and the Moon may be slightly impersonal, more communal. That was a shocking thing that I'll have to explore further and think about and meditate on further. But if we think about Jupiter as that stabilization, this is what comes more easy to you. And forgive me, there's a thunderstorm rolling in. Hopefully everything will work out well with this on this Mercury retrograde day. You know, please, Hermes, be kind. But with Jupiter in its fall, Jupiter as that quality of stabilization, wherever it's moving through in the chart, it is going to attempt to stabilize that, to confirm it, to say, this is, to almost bring it together in some kind of unified system. You know, Jupiter was associated with Orthodox religion, okay, like a system of religion, whereas Venus was like associated with ritual, okay, with like being able to practice, okay. It wasn't the rules themselves or the law, it was the practice of it. It was the people that were practicing the more universal type of systematic organization. So what happens when Jupiter is in Capricorn, especially Capricorn 3? Well, I also think that in your chart, Jupiter, by via stabilizing that particular energy in your chart, it will bring that to you. It will gift it to you, right? So what is being gifted? What is being stabilized? What is being confirmed in the third decan of Capricorn? Positions of authority. So this is where Jupiter is now able to bring its confirmation and stabilization to that third decan where Pluto and Saturn have been, you know, basically asking us to destabilize and to compost and to let go and feeling exiled. So this is really interesting. Now Jupiter and Saturn are moving kind of close together. Now, what's going to happen in the next week or so? We're not going to see a perfection of this, but we're going to see this in the next week. Jupiter is going to conjoin Pluto. All right. And this is something we've been looking at with the coronavirus and things like that as one of the main signatures of the coronavirus, aside from like the Jupiter-Pluto conjunction and things of that nature. Every peak that we've seen between Jupiter and Pluto, we've seen a spike in coronavirus numbers, and this is happening yet again. As I don't want to be like the horn tutor because it's such a horrible thing we're experiencing, but I've been saying this all summer that we're going to have another spike like this, and you know, what we're seeing expanded and what we're seeing confirmed and stabilized is Pluto's destabilization. Like it's a you know a confirmation of that destabilization energy, of that fermentation energy, of that questioning something on a large scale, so that we can eventually compost it into something new. All right. The other thing I talked about last week was you may be gifted, or you may have thrust upon you through luck, through maybe a circumstance of a gift, positions of authority, right? And it's difficult with Jupiter in this position because that authority that is gifted, we feel the burden of it. We feel the Saturnian weight of responsibility in this particular decan. All right. Now, Jupiter is going to be moving through the terms of Venus 14 to 22 degrees. It's making all the same aspects that Saturn is. It's co-present with Saturn, its host. It's making the overcoming square to Mars and Aries, sextile the planets in Scorpio, the Sun and Mercury retrograde, and then it will be squaring Mercury and Venus in Libra. It'll also make a trine with Venus in Virgo before it moves into Libra. It's co-present with its host. Okay. So it's sitting at the table with Saturn right now. All right, let's move forward to Mars and think about this. Mars is going to be still retrograde, slow in motion, moving from 17 to 16 degrees backwards of Aries. It's in its own domicile. It is in the terms of Mercury, 12 to 20 degrees. It's receiving that overcoming square from Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn. It is making an opposition once Mercury retrogrades back into Libra and opposes, and it will make the opposition to Mercury retrograde and to Venus when Venus moves into Libra, excuse me. The Mars will be in its own domicile. So it is pulling on all of its resources of severing, separation. It is able to manifest the necessary severing to create individuation so that we can uh, so that we can prepare ourselves for union of that individual spirit with a body. I think about this. We are all going through this process of individuation, separating from the old paradigm. Okay. And we're getting ready to have inspiration about new birth, especially with Uranus in Taurus, of how we're going to create a new society and a new way of dealing with material resources and the way that we go through processes of exchange and our monetary system. We're going through changes where we are seeing, the fall of an old government so that we can create some new uh, way of governing that is more fair and more equitable and takes into account the needs of the many rather than just the need of the one or the king. Okay. So what we're seeing, I think, with this Jupiter Saturn conjunction is a new paradigm that is more taking into account the idealistic air, right? The idealistic qualities of um, universality, right? Of being able to like think about uh, how even the most exiled person in a society is going to be taken care of rather than just the select few. That's part of this new paradigm shift that we're seeing. The shift from the elite having all the power to redistributing that power to the people. And I really do think that that is part of this paradigm shift. Okay. But there's risks inherent with that too. There is downsides to that. As we become more fair and equitable, it may be more difficult to become individuated. It may be more difficult to feel like we are individuals within that have unique consciousnesses within this new system. All right. If everybody is the same, then or are given the same things, how do we stand out? How do we attain rank within that system? That because that is one of the significations of the sun is attaining rank or attaining respect, right? So how do we feel respected and feel like we've done something significant within a society that values equality above all else? So we have to work with that paradox. I'm not saying that equality is wrong. I'm saying that we need it. I'm saying that the system has been really lopsided. All right. But how do we become individuals within that? How do we become more than just our role? How do we become more than just our I don't know, how we're viewed by our skin color? How do we become more than just, our caste? I guess you could say that's a terrible word for it, but our well, our economic status. Like how do we become individual spirit souls within that system that is becoming more homogenized? And that is a good question. And we've seen the shift to that where anybody can become a king, anybody can become a star, anybody can become a rock star now with social media, right? And that was one of the things with social media was like the ability for the common person to become famous and reducing the gatekeeper type of experience with that. All right. So Mars has a role in this. Mars is really trying to help us determine who we are in that new system. And that's going to necessitate saying who we aren't. Now, Venus, we have a busy week for Venus. Venus is moving through Virgo this week, 27 to 30 degrees of Virgo, moving fast. It is in its fall in Virgo, where it is depressed. Venus is in the house of Mercury, where Mercury is trying to destabilize things and cast doubt and contest. And Venus's role is to reunify that which was separate and bring things together and harmonize through communal friendships. Maybe through even impersonal friendships, through like groups. Okay. So Venus has a tough time because it is fundamentally being provided for seeing the differences and seeing casting doubt and saying how do we bring together the things that have really become disparate elements. And it's tough for Venus to do that in that position. So but Venus has a little bit of dignity. It is the triplicity ruler by day, so there is some sort of community where we may feel like we are uh, where we understand our differences and we may be able to find unity in feeling uh, that we don't have belonging. I think that might be part of the Venus and Virgo type of thing, right? Venus is depressed, but we're depressed together. I think that's kind of the triplicity type of thing. Now, Venus will be in the terms of Mars from 21 to 28 degrees, and the terms of Saturn from 28 to 30 degrees. So malefic bound lords for Venus on Monday before it moves into Libra on Tuesday. In Virgo, it will make a trine with Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn, and it will sextile the Sun and Mercury in Scorpio. The host of Venus will be Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, which it has a sextile relationship with. So we're reviewing things in the past. We're seeing like all the past things that maybe we've lost and that we need to shift towards gratitude of what still remains. We're composting old friendships. We're composting old experiences. We're composting old communications. And Venus is trying to pick up the pieces and reunify the pieces of that fermentation process and say, what do we need to hang on to from what we've lost, and what do we, or from what needs to go, and what do we just need to let return to the earth? That's what Venus has been doing with this third decan. And then those things have been cooperating right now with Venus and Mercury in Scorpio and Virgo, respectively. There is this really great harmony between them. You know, sextiles are of the nature of Venus. There is this ability to like work together to make sure that we are letting go of what needs to be let go of, and not, you know, throwing the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. Now, we do have a big shift this week with Venus moving into Libra. Now, that's going to happen on Tuesday, the 27th. Venus is going to move from 0 to 6 degrees of Libra this week, where it returns home. This is the diurnal temple or the domicile of Venus. It will still be moving fast. It will start off in the terms of Saturn, its exaltation lord, from 0 to 6 degrees, and then move into the terms of Mercury from 6 to 14 degrees. Once Venus moves into Libra, it will start making an overcoming square to Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn. It will be co-present with Mercury retrograde, okay? And it will oppose Mars in Aries, okay? It's in its own domicile. So Now, in the Hellenistic way of thinking about things, squares with benefics, especially when benefics were in the overcoming position, when they were earlier in the zodiac, weren't necessarily bad things. Okay. It may be a little bit harder to bring things about. Okay. There may be some challenges involved, but Venus is trying to bonify these planets right here, Saturn, Jupiter in particular. Okay. It's trying to, our ability to see other sides of the issue, our ability to reunify the two disparate elements of our society is well supported. Now, one of the things that I saw last night was the last presidential debate. And I think Joe Biden did a really good job. And I think that the thing that I appreciated about Joe Biden the most, and it was a brilliant thing that he did. If he was, I don't know if he was told to do this by his handlers or if it was something that he really, really truly believes. I think he does. Maybe I'm projecting what I believe onto what he believes, but that's what we do with our politicians. He said, I am not a president of red and blue states. I am aspiring to be the president of the United States, of all states. I want to represent all of the people, not just these particular individual, separated, severed, martial states. And Donald Trump does the exact opposite. He has Mars in the first house. He's a very divisive, separating and severating figure. Okay. And that is part of who he is as a person. He can't help it. And there may be some role that he is playing with that martial consciousness because he's part of this grand cosmic dance. But my man Joe Biden is a Sagittarius rising. He's a Jupiterian with Jupiter exalted in Cancer. He's a stabilizer. He's somebody that is going to bring more stability and unification and bridge that gap. Right now, he does have the sun in Scorpio, which is Mars ruled. So you saw last night that he was a little feisty, and he was, pretty impassioned and saying this is what needs to be composted. This is what isn't working with the Trump administration, and here's what we need to do to move forward. It was an interesting blend of saying what wasn't working and what needs to happen in the future, and it's a real interesting combination to me. But I thought that the brilliant thing and the hopeful thing was that he was speaking to all Americans and not just the right, the left, the blue, the red. And that's something that's sorely, sorely needed right now. And I think that Venus moving into Libra is going to be able to begin that process of reunification and reharmonization and saying, you know what, we are one country. We are not, 50 separate countries or two separate countries. Okay. We're one country. And if we're able to just kind of like rebalance some of these polarized extremes, that's what Venus is going to be doing in this domicile of Libra. She's has all of her own resources, her ability to soften, her ability to be attractive, okay? Her ability to weigh both sides of an issue, her ability to have empathy and to be receptive and to listen will allow her to create that harmony that is being sought right now or that we sorely need. So that's what we're seeing with Venus moving into Libra. Mercury this week is still going to be retrograde in Scorpio. It's going to be moving backwards from 2 to 0 degrees of Scorpio, very slow. It is peregrine in Scorpio, and it will be in the terms of Mars from 0 to 7 degrees. Now it will move back into Libra on the 27th, and it will square Saturn exactly on November the 1st. While Mercury is in Scorpio, it will be conjoining or co-present with the Sun. Actually, it will conjoin the Sun exactly on Sunday. If you're listening to this on Sunday, that will be the Mercury Cazimi moment. And then we will start a separation of the Mercury with the Sun. So it's co-present with the Sun. It's sextile Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn and sextile Venus in Virgo. The host of Mercury when it's in Scorpio is Mars retrograde in Aries, which it has an aversion relationship with, but the like and girding. Now, when Mercury retrogrades back into Libra, it will move from 30 to 26 degrees of Libra, and it will gain dignity by triplicity. So it'll gain communal support. Triplicity is sort of like you can think of it as being Jupiterian in nature. It's like you have the support of your peers, you've got friends. Okay, it's the support of your friends, your community, and maybe your personal friends. So Mercury may be able to soften the communications that we may be experiencing. It will be moving through the terms of Mars from 28 to 30 degrees, and then the terms of Venus from 21 to 28 degrees. It will be co-present with Venus, its host, which is a very helpful aspect in Hellenistic astrology, and it'll be making that overcoming square to Saturn and Jupiter in Capricorn while making an opposition with Mars and Aries. So what is Mercury doing? We may really be trying to weigh both sides. Mercury, according to Schmidt, contests. It was the ruler of sports contests. That's what we're doing in sporting events, is where one side is trying to beat the other. All right. It destabilizes. It's that lawyer in the cosmic courtroom or in the cosmic mind. Think of the cosmic mind as, all these different facets of one particular consciousness speaking to one another or speaking to itself. All right. Because it is multifaceted. And Mercury is that kind of voice that is, saying, well, what about this? What about this? What about this? And I think that what we're going to see with Mercury in Libra 3 is a destabilization or contesting of our ability to keep our inner peace, our equilibrium. Okay, because that's some of the significations of Libra 3 is we're really going to be challenged to be able to keep our peaceful center. Now, Venus is going to be helping because Venus is going to be providing resources for Mercury to keep that center, but it'll still be like, okay, let's question how we keep our center, how we become the eye of the storm, which is some of the significations of Libra 3. All right. So there will be an ability to review the way that you maintain your inner peace or the way that we maintain social peace. Okay. With Libra, it's more of a externalized peace. How do we keep the peace with our social contracts that we have with one another? Think about Taurus is more about inner peace. Taurus is about how do we stabilize and reunify and harmonize ourselves with the body. Okay. Whereas we're trying to harmonize with the soul and with the spirit in Libra. We're trying to return to spiritual consciousness and say, okay, did you, when you in the course of a lifetime, did you do what you needed to do? Were you balanced? Did you create karma? Did you create weight in your heart, against the weight of the ostrich feather? Were they equal? And if they aren't, you got to go back and do it again. And you got to try to reharmonize. Okay, that might be one of the meanings of life, I think, is can we come into balance? It's certainly one of the meanings of life in the Tao, okay, the yin yang, where a little bit of the light is always born in the darkness and a little bit of the darkness is born in the light, and they're constantly intermingling with one another in this unified dance. So, one of the things to think about this week is how do you avoid going to extremes? Because I would say that Aries Mars wants to go to extremes. It wants to individuate sometimes. And we have to really ask ourselves, how are we creating balance? How are we creating the ability to balance out the very martial desire to maybe have some kind of self-centered identity, to separate from that which we are not, which we do through anger. A lot of times we get angry because someone doesn't agree with us, because we say, I am not this and I don't agree with you, so I'm going to get angry, right? That's Mars. And with Mars in Aries opposing Mercury in Libra, that like, oh, I don't agree with you is going to be through some conversations where you're trying to weigh both sides of an issue. And we have to be careful that we don't get off track and off balance. All right, let's talk about the moon this week. The moon is going to be waxing from its first quarter that we're experiencing right now to the full phase. And that full moon happens on Halloween, and that will be conjoining, the moon will be conjoining Uranus. The moon's going to be slow this week, so bringing things to form is, difficult. The moon is peregrine in Pisces and in Aries, and then it will move into its exaltation in Taurus, where it also has triplicity rulership in the nighttime and is the ruler of the second decan of Taurus. So lots of dignity. And we'll break that down as we get into the dailies, but at that full moon, we may be able to bring some kind of transcendental ideal into form, because it is really full with the light of the sun. Conversely, we may be letting go of some forms. So we may be letting go of forms, with the light, the spirit, the animating spirit of the Scorpio sun, maybe letting go of form so that we can achieve a more idealized form, which is Uranus and Taurus. All right. I love it when I study my man, Robert Schmidt. And, I will also give a shout out to my teacher, Achyuta Bhavadas, because he really introduced me to a lot of Schmidt's work. And he was somebody who knew Mr. Schmidt personally and was a disciple, I guess, or a student of his before he passed away after a stroke. A huge loss for the astrological community. Thinking about loss right now, that's somebody that we lost too soon before he was able to. Oh, he gave us a lot. He really did, and I think that he was in the process of articulating and giving us even more. And that is a real loss for the community because now we have to kind of um, use Robert's way of thinking as a springboard. And I don't mean just his knowledge, I mean his philosophical ability to think like an ancient astrologer. That's the key. It's not just about learning rules, it's about learning to think like the universal mind, learning to think like an ancient Greek philosopher, learning to think like an ancient Greek astronomer, which were one and the same. So that is the biggest gift that Robert Schmidt, I think, gave all of us is learning how to think. And, he had a Gemini moon. His Gemini moon is at the exact same degree as my Venus. So I feel, 16 degrees Gemini. He had the moon right on Rigel, which was that fixed star that was associated with having the foot in the river of knowledge. And boy, howdy, did he ever. So real interesting. Really would advise you to seek out some of his work. Some of it can be a little harder to find. Like I said, there is a really great lecture series through the Association for Young Astrologers that if you become a member, I think you'll have instant access to that archive. It's well worth it. All right, let's move forward to our daily report. I'm going to go one chart here. Oops, I went to something else. We're going to go forward to Monday and we're going to put the sun on the ascendant. We're going to go pretty quickly through the first couple days because there's only lunar aspects on the first couple days of the week. Now, I have some thoughts about going through all of these meticulously because one of the things that Robert Schmidt points out is that Time Lords, perfected Time Lords and Time Lord systems were much more used than transits and secondary progressions in the Hellenistic system. So I have almost an existential crisis about thinking about how are you supposed to use these planetary aspects for the week. And I think it goes like this. Here's how you can get value out of this uh, in a Hellenistic way, but still thinking about the transits. Number one, figure out what your perfected time lord of the year is, and that can be done by going online and downloading a chart. You know, the way that this works is every year of the life, the ascendant clicks over to a new sign. So if your ascendant, like this chart here, is Scorpio, that's what for the year 0 to year 1, that is your perfected time lord would be Mars. And then for year 1 to year 2, it would be Jupiter, and so on and so forth. Every 12 years it comes back to 1. So like, for example, I'm 40 years old, and that makes, I've gone around the circle, came back around, you know, 3 times already. Like, and now I'm in a 5th house perfection year, which in my chart is ruled by is the sign Sagittarius, ruled by the planet Jupiter. So that's my perfected time lord. Okay. So I would really pay special attention to contacts with Jupiter and to what Jupiter is doing over the course of the week. So if Jupiter's your time lord, pay special attention to what the moon is doing to Jupiter, to what Jupiter is doing in special, where it is in the zodiac, and what contacts it's making. And this is true for all of the other planets. And that in that way, you can use this more generalized horoscope to be able to get a more personalized experience. And the other thing I would say too is what we're really doing when we're looking at these transits is, I think, we are watching, we are observing the universal mind playing out a universal drama. It's a stage, it's a play. And what we're trying to do is trying to figure out the reflections of that on the Platonic cave, right? On Plato's cave, right? Astrology is, all we're seeing is the shadows dancing on the cave wall. And the universal mind is playing it out in the background, but we're trying to interpret it through the shadows. These planets are all shadows. This life we're living is a shadow of that cosmic consciousness. And, we're trying to in a secondarily process, like shadows are a secondary reality. We're trying to second guess what is going on in the universal mind, because we are part of that universal mind. We are its body, so to speak, right? We are the universal mind infused into substance. And I think that's a really great way to absorb this podcast, is to think about that and to figure out what your time lord is, and to be able to just see if you can get a glimpse into the universal mind. And yes, that may have some personal signification for you. It will have more personal signification for you when your time lord is activated by the transits. But if you can understand what's going on in the universal mind, because other people will be affected by other planets. So they're playing out that portion of the drama while you're playing out your portion of the drama. It's really fascinating how that all can fit together. So let's talk about Monday. On Monday, October the 26th, the only aspect we have is a sextile between the moon and retrograde Uranus at 10:43 a.m. at 8 degrees of Pisces and Taurus, respectively. The moon will be continuing its first quarter phase in the sign of Pisces. Okay, so we're just kind of just rolling along on Monday. We have just experienced the conjunction of Mercury and the sun. So we've had Mercury's Cazimi moment. So really pay attention to any ideas that come to light, any inspirations that you're having. I think I'm having them right now. Like, I'm feeling that Mercury conjunction very, very intensely right now. And think about what you're experiencing at this moment in the beginning of this week, and what wants to be birthed from the underworld. What ideas want to emerge? What needs to be left behind, and what needs to be so that you can have a new birth of individuation. All right. So that's what's happening on Monday. Venus is still in Virgo. It's about to move forward into Libra. The moon will be kind of, collecting the light of the sun. The moon will be in a trine with the sun. Okay. It will be harmony between the lights. So We may be able to collect that light of that Scorpio moon, the Scorpio sun, and be able to manifest uh, a journey, I would say. The Pisces is all about the internal journey of Jupiter. It is stabilizing our inner world and going off in search of meaning in the inner reality. So we may be faced with loss with the sun in Scorpio. That sends us off into an inner journey to be able to understand that loss within the context of our life and the story and the narrative and the chapters of our life, and what that means for us moving forward in the next stages. Now, the moon is going to be applying to Neptune. And I talked about Neptune in the beginning of this, where Neptune is kind of that, according to Schmidt, that transcendental moon, that universal moon, that dissolving quality into substance. So we may feel like our lives on Monday and Tuesday, like we're dissolving any sort of identity, any sort of, we're releasing the spirit, the animating spirit, so that we're returning to substance. It's almost like we're melting into back into the earth. And that can feel, we could feel tired. I think that's the main thing, is fatigue, because we don't have the animating spirit of the sun, we don't have the vitality. But again, why do we have Neptune transits? Because sometimes form needs to dissolve back into its base substance so that we can use it for something else later. Right? This is a harmony. I love the way that Schmidt talked about the dance between Neptune and Uranus, and Pluto being that kind of like intermediary, that process. Pluto is the acceleration of that process, that fermentation process between the moon and the sun. Pluto is about death, but Pluto is about rebirth. It's about the dissolving of form. It's about the creation of form. It's both. All right, so that's what I got for Monday, the 26th. Let's move forward to Tuesday. On Tuesday, October the 27th, this is where our astrology starts getting interesting. We have a number of lunar aspects, the conjunction of Neptune with the moon at 18 degrees of Pisces at 5:40 a.m. The moon will make a sextile to Jupiter at 9:37 a.m. at 20 degrees of Pisces in Capricorn. It will then sextile Pluto in the afternoon around 2 o'clock, and then sextile Saturn at 8:46 p.m. So the moon is going to, we're going to be unifying with that dissolving quality of returning to substance with Neptune. And then we're going to have the moon having a relationship, a conversation with the Capricorn planets, where we are examining power and examining structure and examining authority and the way that we wield our power and our authority and our administrative qualities. So the moon is an activator. The moon, activates those qualities. So we'll see that, but in a sextile relationship. Now, the other non-lunar things that we're experiencing on Tuesday, the 27th, first of all, Mercury is going to retrograde back into the third decan of Libra. And about less than 10 minutes later, Venus moves into the first decan of Libra. So let's break down Libra, because we're going to be thinking about Libra a lot. Like, we're going to have a shift towards a lot of Libran energy here. Now, one thing I've been doing as part of my research lately is I really want to give a lot of credit to Austin Coppock and his book 36 Faces. In addition to Robert Schmidt and Achyuta Bhavadas and Demetra George, he is probably the other person that I draw inspiration from very heavily. I would not be able to do the forecast without those three people in particular, with also some shout outs to Chris Brennan and Ben Dykes. So those are the people that I really, in the modern era, that I've, really been leaning on or standing on their shoulders. Yeah, Austin's great. And I always find new facets to his book. The decans are complicated. there are a lot of different ways people have explored the decans, from Mesopotamia to Egyptian qualities to the Greeks and how they dealt with them, and even in the Indian system, like in the Jyotisha. And one of the things that I've been kind of a new avenue that I've been exploring beyond the tarot is the daimonic deities associated with each decan. And I'm doing research on this, and I'm probably going to be fleshing this out potentially for a class offering. And let me know if you're interested in that in the comment section, because maybe do some market research. But it's really giving me a new awareness of how these particular decans work, and maybe even potentially new daimons to I don't know, to propitiate, to have success in these particular areas of life. Daimons are interesting, and go check out Dorian Greenbaum's work for really understanding daimons. Daimons were sort of on the level that was slightly lower than the planets. They were intermediaries between us and the planets. If we say that the TRANS-SATURNIANs were intermediaries between the planets and the fixed stars, the daimons are those intermediaries between the elemental realm and the planetary realm. So they're very personal. They're ones that we can. That they're what I'm observing is that they really represent very specific, almost like human qualities. Like for example, in the first decan of Libra, the planetary, or the daimon, the deity, the spirit, the illuminating spirit, according to 36 heirs of the zodiac, which is a fragmentary piece that I downloaded the other day. You can find it online. I believe it was translated. I found it translated by a Brazilian astrologer, and I can't recall his name off the top of my head. But it's just this 3 paragraphs where they talk about the different daimons of the decans. And in the first decan of Libra, we have the URANUS, or the Furies, which they are the 3 chthonic deities of vengeance, right? And in the Iliad, they are described as there's a quote that say, the URANUS that under the earth take vengeance on man, whosoever hath sworn a false oath. Hesiod, in his mythology, talks about them being born from the drops of blood which fall after Kronos castrated Uranus. Now, it's interesting because one of the other rulers of Libra, Venus, also was born from that castration in the sea foam. Okay. So there were 3 sisters, 3 Furies, and they've been depicted in different ways with like snakes for heads or things like that. They were kind of hideous monsters. And one was named Alecto, the punisher of moral crimes. Another was named Megara, the punisher of infidelity, oath breakers, and theft. And then we had Tisiphone, who was the punisher of murderers. So anytime we have some kind of breaking of a social contract, the Furies are going to be the ones that you could petition potentially for retribution and justice. Now, overall, the sign of Libra is associated with Mot, who was the goddess, or the god, I don't know, I think it was feminine, of the underworld, that was saying, did you do right in your life? All right. Did you treat people fairly? Did you, create balance? Are you bringing anything with you as far as maybe karma or something like that? So in this first decan, we have these awarenesses of these injustices. These Furies are making us aware of like all the wrongs that we've had. Now, what does it mean when Venus is here, though? Now, Venus is trying to soothe those things, trying to reunify. We may have this awareness of the things that we've been wronged by, these imbalances, and we're trying now to start to bring those things together. And it's very interesting, the journey that we go through in Libra. We have an awareness of the injustice and inequality in the first decan. We start negotiating new terms of a deal or a contract. We break the contract, or we commit to the contract in the second decan. Okay. And then in the third decan, we are resting after potentially a successful reunification. And we're also, Austin Coppock talks about it as a trying to balance out many different things at once, like becoming the calm within the center of chaos. I don't think we're creating or I don't think that we can always pacify every single situation around us. And this is what the third decan of Libra teaches us. All right. We just have to know how to constantly be readjusting to be able to view life through that peaceful center, through the hub of the wheel. This is a really great metaphor for astrology and for life in general. That wheel keeps on spinning. There's going to be ups, there's going to be downs, there's going to be circumstances of gain, there's going to be circumstances of loss. That's part of the great cosmic dance. But we have to learn that it's an eternal dance and it keeps going, whether we are in physical form or not, right? And that's the lens that we're viewing life through the third decan of Libras, is through that hub and that center of the wheel, through that peaceful equilibrium that we constantly have to make readjustments to. Okay, we never, if you're a Libra person, if you're a Libra inspired person, Sun in Libra, Venus in Libra, ascendant Libra, you're constantly trying to maintain that equilibrium. It doesn't mean you are in balance all the time. In fact, you're probably one of the signs that is out of balance quite a bit, depending on where those placements are. But it is because of that balance being thrown off, you are learning on this plane to be able to create harmony, whether it's externally or internally. Now, in this case, with Libra, it's a diurnal masculine planet. It's a or sign. I'm sorry. It's a masculine gendered sign in the traditional system, which associated masculinity was associated with external things. Okay, so we have this kind of desire for this external harmonization, this reunification that is external, that is more societal rather than internally. All right. So let me think for a second. Yeah, Venus is really powerful in Libra, and she is going to be creating ritualized harmony. So you may see in the collective, or you may be inspired to ritualize some kind of reunification process. One of the main rituals of unification is marriage. This is why we associate Libra with marriage a lot, because we are creating a ritual, Venus, of bonding, which is actually Saturn, its exaltation ruler. Think of the combination of the ruler and the exaltation lord. Okay, the domicile lord and the exaltation lord. We are ritualizing binding. Okay, and sometimes we are ritualizing separation. That's why Libra also is a sign of divorce. Okay, because sometimes there is a time where we are denied, or we are cast out, or we are deprived of a relationship. I have some Libra friends that they want a relationship more than anything in the world, and they will not take no for an answer. Like, and you know who you are. Like, and it's so sad because it's the deprivation of that. And I hope that they do find what they're looking for, because we all do deserve to feel, I think, some happiness in the world. And I think that it's just a really interesting thing that may be part of what they're doing here on this planet, is learning how to create the circumstances for that harmony. And here's a little tip. It's very difficult to be in harmony with other people if you're not in harmony with yourself. I know that that's hard to hear sometimes, and that is cliche about like how to find a good relationship, but I really do think it's true. Take it from a Taurus moon, like somebody who is very concerned with inner peace, is that I did not find a committed relationship until I started to love myself, and until I started to feel more of a self appreciation and an ability to stand on my own. And I do think that those two things are related. And I think that that is probably some of the best way to facilitate becoming involved in a more social relationship. Because if you're at odds with yourself, it's very difficult um, to know how to come into peace with others. And it is it is one of the challenges of Libra suns, I think, to be able to find that inner harmony, that harmony of a personal identity, so that they will be able to bring that energy into a social context. Now, if we're talking about daimons and deities, in the second decan, I have some confusion over this. And if any of you have done any research, please reach out and help me with it. There are two daimons that are associated with that second decan. In the 36 heirs of the zodiac, there's one called Kairos, which was talked about as the opportune moment. It was opportunity. It was like you're in the right place at the right time. Now, Austin Coppock talks about it as Horkos, which was, I believe, a brother of the Furies, or a nephew or a son or something like that, where he was specifically tasked with punishing oath breakers. Okay, so there's two different things. And there is some confusion because there is another decan, I believe the third decan of Scorpio, that is associated with Kairos. And then there's these little crosses around the Libra one, which I think means that they're like, we're not sure if this is right or not. I think that's what that means. So anyway, but the third decan, so we move from the Uranus to Kairos or Horkos, confusing, to Nemesis. And Nemesis in the Greek sense is the restoration of right proportion. Now, this is important because Mercury is in this decan. Okay. It moves into this decan on Tuesday, the 27th. Nemesis is that, I believe, I think it's associated with Saturn and the ability to restore the right proportion. And Nemesis is often contrasted with the concept of Tuke, or the daimon Tuke, which is the randomness of the distribution of fate. Okay. So I think that sometimes we get dealt, a difficult hand. Sometimes we have martial accidents. Sometimes we are given good stuff through Venus. Sometimes we're just handed things. Sometimes the moon brings us circumstances and forms that are good or bad. Okay. And Nemesis is about how do we use our almost like our mental faculties and our ability to reason to bring them back into balance, and use our almost our solar spiritual quality too. I think that could be another way of thinking about it, is since Saturn is part of the diurnal sect, it is using that, binding quality, that enduring quality, to bring things back into harmony, sometimes through punishment. Okay. So there is a quality of punishment in Libra for sure. If you know some Libra people in your life, Libra's associated with judges. And what do judges hand out? Punishments. You're not going to go in front of a judge and be rewarded. I guess I will backtrack and say sometimes you will. If you've been wronged, you may be rewarded with restitution. So a judge both does give and does take away. So you can see that those are both qualities. It's restoring the equilibrium. Why do people go to court? Because there is an imbalance in a relationship. Okay. And they say, I've been wronged. I deserve this instead of this. Okay. And the judge has to take all the testimony, all the mercurial contesting from the lawyers, and then ultimately has to stabilize the situation. That's why Jupiter is associated with judges, because Jupiter is ultimately restoring harmony to the situation. You either restore harmony by putting a murderer in jail, thereby, restoring social harmony and potentially retribution for or punishment, maybe it's Tisiphone, right? Punisher of murderers. restoring balance to that situation. Or like, let's say that somebody destroyed your property, or you got hit by a car and that their actions, okay, like caused you injury and caused you to lose money or to lose faculties of your body. That judge may say, you have to pay this person $100,000 in injury settlement. That is restoring balance to the situation, so that person can pay their medical bills and restore their health. Hopefully, doesn't always work out that way, but that's the ideal behind it. And this is what Mott's trying to do. Mott's the ultimate judge. Mott's like, how can you restore balance between your experience on this form plane, on this material plane, and your spirituality and in the one mind? How can you restore the balance between the one thing and the one mind? I believe that's a hermetic principle, right? How do we restore that balance? Because sometimes that gets out of whack. We may not be manifesting based on the soul's higher, I don't know, purpose. And then we have to answer for that on this plane of existence. But again, I want to point out, because in the past, sometimes I've been a little bit fatalistic or deterministic or stoic. And I am really starting to move off of that position quite a bit through Cornelius's work, through Schmidt's work, through just reading more about astrological magic and things like that. There are some things that are fated. There's some hemarmene that you have to experience, but there is pronoia. There is some negotiation through your knowledge and through propitiating the deities, through your relationship with these planetary forces. I highly encourage all of you, even if it's just a thought exercise, and it'll be more effective if it's not, if you use the power of your belief, that you start having a conversation with the universal mind, with the cosmic consciousness, because it's not just this disembodied, it's not just this inert thing. It may be disembodied, but we are the embodiment of it. But if you have a conversation with it, like you are almost giving yourself a pep talk, but humbling yourself to it as well, because it's bigger than you. It's bigger than all of us. You might really see some really interesting results. I've really felt I'm really feeling some interesting results this week after starting that practice again. One in particular, I did a propitiation to the terrestrial Hermes on Wednesday, because Mercury is retrograde and in the underworld right now, underneath the beams of the sun, there is a different Orphic hymn, or like a little prayer from Orphism in this ancient Greek kind of religion, I guess. And I said a different prayer to Hermes than I would if Hermes was direct or if Mercury was direct. And I had the best day. I had all these interesting things and ideas came to me. I started, thinking about a new schedule and how I wanted to differentiate my time. It was really quite powerful. All of the interesting things that were effective, because a lot of times we think of Mercury retrograde as ineffective. I don't know about that. It just depends. Are you communicating with the deity in the right manner? I think that's part of the challenge. Okay, let's move forward. Let's move forward to Wednesday, the 28th. And we'll go quickly through the next couple of days because we just have some lunar aspects, and we'll get to our full moon because I know that you might be anticipating that. So on Wednesday, October the 28th, the moon moves into Aries at 4:44 a.m. in the waxing gibbous phase. And the only lunar aspect we have of that day is the moon will oppose the newly ingressed Venus into Libra at 0 degrees of Aries and Libra at 5:32 a.m. So potentially we may have a desire to bring some sort of individual project or individual mandate or individual idea into form. But we have to think about how we are going to reconcile that with the need to come into harmony or play nice with others. So that may be the gist of late Tuesday, early Wednesday, and the what we're dealing with there. I'm looking for anything else that maybe we may be experiencing. Again, Mercury is in Libra, and it has changed signs in late Tuesday. So now we're reevaluating how we maintain our inner peace, our inner center, and how we balance out the multitude of things that we have to do in our lives. We are going to be kind of starting to feel the opposition between the Sun and Uranus. So there may be some shakeups with some things in our life and in the Scorpio and Taurus ruled areas of our life. So that's what we've got for Wednesday, the 28th. On October the 29th, Thursday, the moon will still be in Aries, moving through that waxing gibbous phase. We have 2 lunar aspects on Thursday. The moon will be conjoining Mars retrograde at 2:33 p.m. at 16 degrees of Aries, and then it will be squaring Jupiter at 10:38 p.m. at 20 degrees of Aries and Capricorn. Taking a look at this chart, that second decan of Aries is the royal decan, where it is the exaltation. It contains the degree 19 degrees Aries, where the sun has its exaltation. It also contains 2 fixed stars that are part of the royal family. I believe Andromeda is there, and Alpheretz, which is part of the constellations, Cepheus. I believe that's the king's name, Cepheus. So we've got this association with this royal family, with sovereignty, with being able to be lord or lady of our own particular world that we've tried to create, this sovereign world where we're able to, we don't necessarily have to follow anyone's rules but our own. We are the royal family. So we may be feeling this with the moon making contact with Mars, is that we're really anxious to separate from a world not of our own creating and move towards a world of our own. Now that may be frustrating though, because Mars is retrograde and we're having difficulty doing that. And Saturn is in the overcoming position, creating, asking us to slow down, asking us to consider, what we are being deprived of and things of that nature. Now Jupiter is in that overcoming position as well, trying to give us positions of authority, or maybe gifting us a position of authority that we may not quite be ready for, and that we may feel the weight of the responsibility of that authority. So on some level, be careful what you wish for. If you're trying to administrate a world, it may not, you may not be able to completely separate yourself from it having collateral damage or collateral effect on other people. And that's one of the things that we're seeing with Mars being in an opposition with Mercury and Venus on these days as well, just by whole sign. So, create your own world. Think about how you are different than others, but also think about how you're going to bring that into balance and into unity with your community and your social group that you're a part of as well. All right, let's move forward to Friday. On Friday the 30th, October the 30th, the moon moves from Aries into Taurus, its exaltation at 5:18 p.m. This is still the waxing gibbous phase, and the moon will move under the bond at 23 degrees of Aries around 4 a.m. That's a position where the moon is either within 15 degrees of conjunction or opposition with the sun, where it's basically hidden. There was like a hidden position. It was held captive by the sun. Okay, so that means that it's difficult to bring things into form. Right? It's the moon is all about using that substance to bring things into being, infusing it into with solar light. Now, this may be a time where the sun's kind of grabbed a hold of the moon and it's infusing it with its scorpionic light, and it's difficult for the moon to kind of like bring it into form because it's like in that furnace, so to speak, or absorbing its final burst of light before it manifests as something at the full moon, before it really shows us what it's really been birthing. Think of the full moon as sort of the birth of the form that was initiated at the moment of conjunction, or the moment of union between the sun and the moon, where the moon was impregnated, okay, with spirit, where substance was impregnated with idealism, okay, and we see the fruition of that come at the full moon. But there's birth pains. That's what the bond is. The bond is labor pains. It's the labor pains of bringing that into the light, and it may be difficult, and you may not see the result yet, but you're going to have that beautiful little baby. You're going to have the beautiful result of what you've been trying to birth once the moon escapes the bond. The moon will be making a square to Pluto at 2:25 a.m. at 22 degrees of Aries and Capricorn. It will also then square Saturn at 9:30 a.m. at 26 degrees Aries and Capricorn, and then make an opposition to retrograde Mercury at 27 Libra at 12:32 p.m. We finally get relief from those difficult aspects at 5:18 p.m. when the moon moves into Taurus. So probably a difficult day of manifestation on Friday, where we are, really working on how are we going to show whatever we've been working on to the world. We're going to have a difficult conversation with Pluto and with Saturn, really trying to understand, the limitations of our idea. And then, we're going to be working on balancing out whether our personal initiative with the needs of the others in our social constructs that we have, in our social relationships and our social contracts. Okay, let's move to Halloween. On Friday, this is Saturday. Sorry. That was Friday. On Saturday, October the 31st, happy Halloween. The moon will be in Taurus. We will experience the fullness of the moon at 10:49 a.m. at 8 degrees of Taurus. So two things that we have to break down here is the full moon and the moon conjoining Uranus and the sun opposing it, right? So those are the elements that we have. So the full moon is pretty close to the degree of the moon's exaltation at about 3 degrees of Taurus. So that's interesting. This is a time where we're seeing something come into form. There is we're holding the balance of growth and decay, of fecundity. Thank you, Austin Kopic, for teaching me that word, and fermentation. And we have two cards in the tarot that really illuminate that for us. We have the Five of Cups associated with the first decan of Scorpio, and the Five of Pentacles associated with the first decan of Taurus. Now, both of them look fairly hard and difficult. Like we've got, these figures that are injured or have an illness or something like that, but they seem like they are finding support. They are outside of a church. And there's always been this debate as to whether they are going to the church or leaving the church. And, in my thought processes now, I think that with Taurus on the 11th house cusp of the Thema Mundi, that they're receiving support, because we see in the second decan them receiving charity. So I think that these are people that may have been fallen on hard times, but are now going to a better type of experience. And it is the union of the spirit with the body, right? Now, the opposite is happening in the Five of Cups, where we have a figure that is mourning the loss of attainment, the loss of form, realizing that there's still something behind, right? It's about turning to gratitude. It's about turning to spirituality. Maybe we lose the body and we exalt the spirit. Or maybe we learn that the body has limitations, so we turn to a more spiritual experience. That there's only so many, there's only so many things we can buy to try to fill the hole in our soul. And when we turn our perspective to appreciate, the spirit, that's when we can go across the bridge into the castle of fulfillment. Now, these two themes are going to be pretty, that we're going to see a dichotomy between them at the full moon. This may be the fruition of, I think you can think of it in two different ways. It's maybe the fruition of what we started at the new moon. Now, this new moon actually was started in the third decan of Libra. So we were trying to find out, how do we come to equilibrium? It was conjoined the fixed star Spica. So we were thinking about what gift we have to give to the world, or maybe even the support that we get from society itself. Excuse me. And we're thinking about, how do we birth that peaceful center? And one of the things that we can think about here is it's balancing at this full moon the need to let go and to embrace spirit, and the need to acknowledge form. And with the moon conjoining Uranus, if we think about it like Schmidt thinks about it, and it's really interesting because it's the moon that's conjoining it. It's almost like a supercharged new moon. Even though it's a full moon, it's a universal new moon. Does that make sense? It's like we're seeing the full moon on the material plane, but maybe we're seeing the infusing of the material plane with a universal consciousness. Because Schmidt described Uranus, if he had to break it down, like a Hellenistic thing. And I think that, now again, this is something that Schmidt's kind of coming up with. So it's he's trying to make a conjecture based on the way he thinks about Hellenistic astrology. But he's saying that with the transcendental sun, aka Uranus, it is like this idealization of what we are striving for as individuals. So you could think about it as an idealized person, or an idealized human, or an idealized society. So we may be trying to figure out the idealization of how we are using our resources. Okay. So we're seeing the full moon may come to bear about, if I'm looking at what's happening in the news cycle, we were thinking about stimulus packages. And what was going on the last time that the sun and Uranus came together, okay, now it's coming to its full moon phase, this was around the 26th of April. Now, this was the beginning of the pandemic, and they were thinking about relief and how to distribute resources to the people because they've experienced loss. So we have the sun casting awareness on what we have lost and how people are suffering, mourning through this loss. And we are trying to figure out how we are going to reunify them again, because the moon is in Venus's other temple. And how do we provide physical resources for those people? So we may see something coming to light about physical resources at this full moon, and in doing it in a very idealized, universal way, a stimulus package potentially. Maybe it happens on Friday. Maybe it happens on Friday or moving into Saturday, and we see the result of it Monday when the moon escapes the bond at Sunday night, moving into Monday. Maybe that's one possible thing, that if I'm trying to use my creative mind to connect it with current events. Now, there may be challenges with this. There may be, the other thing to think about, if we think about the more traditional modern associations with Uranus, is there's this rebellion or resisting authority type of thing, this impatience or restlessness, something new wants to come to fruition. Okay. Now let's think about it though in Schmidt terms. If we have this universal ideal and we have this solar individualism that is manifesting here on the earthly plane, or trying to bring vitality to the earthly plane, we may have a conflict with Uranus opposite the sun between our idealism and what we're actually able to provide with vitality from the planetary sun. Okay. So we may really be feeling some frustration over what we're able to manifest and what we want to manifest ideally with our resources. So, and one other little side note, just a little digression, is on the 26th of April, there was the Pentagon released a bunch of UFO documents and videos about their experiences with unidentified flying objects. So maybe there may be something that comes out in regards to that too. I know that there was also talk about an asteroid that could potentially hit the planet around this time as well. So maybe there is some sort of extraterrestrial object that we have contact with. Maybe it's that. I don't think it's something to be overly concerned about. I don't think scientists are saying that it's probably going to miss us, but who knows? Um, we'll see what happens. like, but interesting ways to think about that, about the Promethean gift of the gods, the idealized, um, you know, fire. Fire, there is an ideal, right? Fire is like this physical gift that is, it gives us an ability to do many interesting things here on the physical plane. But in the story of Prometheus, Prometheus was punished for that severely. He had to suffer for that. So there may also be themes of like to bring uh, universal idealism down to the physical plane. There may be a level of suffering involved because we see the um, the disparateness or the uh, what is the word I'm looking for? We see the inability to have a perfect manifestation of divinity on material form. It just doesn't work that way. Part of material form is its imperfection. And I think that's sometimes why rebellion is also associated with Uranus, because somebody has, think about this, and we'll do more research over time with this. If you have an ideal and you say life should be like this, but what all I see on this physical material plane is the lack of that ideal, you're going to rise up and rebel and say, oh my God, I feel this anxiety about the lack of this spiritual ideal on this plane. And all of these revolutions and these rebellions are fueled by some kind of inspiration and an attempt to manifest a spiritual ideal. And just like Prometheus suffers for it, a lot of times people suffer for it. A lot of times when people are trying to bring a gift to the masses, to the moon, to the lunar signification, there is suffering involved because a lot of times people want to keep staring at the shadows in the cave. And remember, in the Plato's allegory of the cave, or is it Aristotle? No, it's Plato. Yeah. Socrates? I don't know. They're one of those Greek philosophers. I'm second guessing myself now. Regardless, in the allegory of the cave, uh, the prisoner that escapes is trying to tell the other prisoners, hey, this is this amazing divinity. It's this Uranian ideal. And he's punished for it. They're like, we don't want this. We're happy with the shadows. And he suffers for that. He's tried to be pulled back down into that cave. And that's the Uranian energy. It's that idealization. It's the seeing a glimpse. That's why we associate genius and madness with Uranus. You can go mad, and because of your disappointment of not being able to manifest that Uranian ideal. I mean, also you have also people that have manifested amazing gifts to humanity. I believe Nikolai Tesla had some really intense Uranus contacts, and he gave the gift of electricity to the world. And it was because he had this idealism that he kept pursuing. So look at Uranus in your chart. Where do you have this divinity, this divine ideal that wants to manifest? Where do you maybe have almost a divine discontent because it doesn't necessarily live up to what you're visualizing? And how can you reconcile those two things? I personally, I have Uranus in the fourth house, and I was shown as a young person uh, the lack, I guess, of a family ideal. Like I had a lot of my parents went through a lot of marriages in their early years, and I was shuttled around from different step parents and different homes, as far as going back and forth between two parents, like one parent like disappearing for a little while and, going to live with a different parent, having step siblings come into my life and go out of my life, step parents come in and come out. And I think that that led to this idealization of what a family should be and this divine discontent with the family I had. When you experience hardship and separation, you tend to have the fantasy of what it should be. So I don't. This Schmidt thing shaking me to my core. I don't think Neptune is fantasy or idealization at all now, based on Schmidt's model. It's Uranus. Uranus is the idealization planet of saying, can we aspire to something archetypal? Neptune's just dissolving all the form back to the substance that we create from. It's emerging, it's a blending. It's like there's a lack of inspiration in Neptune. It's the removing of inspiration almost, I would say. Whereas Uranus is that's the ideal planet. And Pluto is the one that is the intermediary, the process, the process of fecundity and fermentation, the transformation between one and the other. There's a relationship between these three planets that is a constant dance. So a really interesting way to think about this full moon is where are you idealizing right now? Where do you have almost an unattainable ideal that you're willing to almost suffer for? And how is that conflicting with the real divinity that you can experience on this plane right now with the sun? And how do you manage to bring those back into harmony with Venus and Libra and Mercury and Libra? How can you bring what you desire on a deep spiritual level that you've raised to this level of archetypal with what is actually possible on this material plane? That I think is the real true story of this full moon. Okay, let's move forward to Sunday. Finish things out. Thanks for sticking with me again. I really appreciate all of you that take the time to listen to these forecasts. I put a lot of energy and effort into it, and I love getting those comments in the comment section and interacting with all of you. It's always a pleasure to see people receiving this information. So thank you for hitting that like button and giving those comments. That tells me that you've received the message, and it makes me feel good. On Sunday, the 1st of November, we will be continuing the full moon phase in Taurus. And remember, daylight savings starts at 2 a.m. starts. Daylight savings ends on Sunday at 2 a.m. Eastern time. So we are moving from, this is one mistake that a lot of astrologers make when they list times. And I really became aware of this from a really great astrologer, Samuel Reynolds. It was a pet peeve of his when people were listing EST instead of EDT. And I really started to make sure I was doing it correctly after I heard him pointing that out. So we're moving from Eastern Daylight Time to Eastern Standard Time, or Mountain Daylight Time to Mountain Standard Time, or Pacific Daylight Time to Pacific Standard Time. I really hate this time change. I really wish they would do away with it completely, because it throws off all the circadian rhythms and stuff like that. And it's something that we've brought with us from a former time in society where we were trying to conserve, whale oil for our lamps and things like that, and you know, have more ability to work in the fields and things that really aren't part of our society as much anymore. But anyway, set your clocks, I believe, forward. Like, anyway, do your research on which way you're going to go. And then you will be able to wake up on time. But remember, the clocks will shift. Fall, uh, you, what is it? Fall back, spring. Yeah, fall back, spring forward. There you go. Okay. I'm going to screw everybody up. Anyway, uh, on Sunday the 1st, we have a couple lunar aspects. The moon's going to sextile Neptune. It will trine Jupiter. And so it'll sextile Neptune in the morning, 5:30 a.m. And then it'll trine all of those Capricorn planets, Jupiter, Pluto, and Saturn, respectively, at 11 a.m., 2:14 p.m., and then 9:29 p.m. So it's going to make positive contacts with those Capricorn planets that are really trying to get us to have an awareness of how we are administrating power within our lives as a collective entity as well. At 6:29 p.m., the sun's going to move into the second decan of Scorpio. And this decan is represented by the Six of Cups in the Rider-Waite Tarot. And this is, Austin Kappa calls this an apparatus for mutual distillation. Book T in the Book of Thoth calls it pleasure, which is strange. That's a strange one. There's a number of fixed stars in this decan too. It's like there's no prominent fixed stars really. There's a couple that are a little bit less prominent in our astrological magnitude and in the tradition in the first decan, but we've got like 4 that have been used a lot in the second decan. At 12 degrees, we have Acrux, which is part of the Southern Cross. We have Alphecca at 12 degrees also, which is part of one of the crowns. And then at 15 degrees, we have Zubin El Janubi, which is one of the claws in the scorpion, or one of the scales, I think. It did double duty at one point. And then at 19 degrees, Zubin El Shamali. So in this particular decan, we have an awareness of the deep emotional exchanges that we have, that we are trying to, the hunger that we experienced, because Austin Kovic talks a lot about hunger in the first decan of Scorpio. It finds, a mate, something to suck energy off of, right? Now, a lot of tarot significations talk about nostalgia in this card. So potentially, if we carry it out here, and I'm thinking about these particular decans as how are we going to, the realization of desires that are no longer healthy for us, how can we separate those and separate the forms that are no longer good for us, or the desire for those physical forms, and then move towards more spiritual consciousness. And you could see this story play out in these 3 cards. We are first get introduced to the concept of loss. And what happens when we think about loss? We have a feeling of mourning, but then we have this feeling of like nostalgia for what was in the past. And this is where we may be having memories of things that have already gone beyond, and we may be trying to recreate those, on some level. So I think this decan is a lot about memory. It's a lot about the past. It's a lot about like, yearning for something that is already, outlived its time. And then in the third decan, we have to choose, how are we going to let go of something and maybe choose a more spiritual path, right? Let go of the old forms, the bad habits. And sometimes when we are going through this, nostalgia phase, this is the time where you break up with, think about it like this. You had a relationship, you realized that it was toxic, and you break up. Now, inevitably, a lot of the times there is this period of time where you get back together because you're like, oh, I forgot about how bad it was. Maybe we need to get back together and I don't know, have one last go around or something like that. You idealize that relationship. I'm watching Parks and Rec right now, and think about Ron Swanson and his ex-wives. He always gets back together with one of the Tammys eventually. And this is especially apparent with his wife, Tammy, too, ex-wife. They're when they get back together, they're always, well, they're always trying to have sex with each other, like to be blunt, but they are always exasperating. She brings out the worst in him, right? She brings out that desire, that carnal desire. And it never ends up working out because it's based on, it was toxic. It was toxic carnality between the two of them. So you have to think about in this decade, be careful not to idealize that which is already in the past. Be careful not to get back involved with a relationship that only brings out negativity within you. You have to think about this mutual distillation. Are those relationships really bringing you joy, or are they bringing you negativity? And then finally, as you move through the third decan, it's leaving those things behind finally, and going beyond it, and moving towards back and returning to the hope that will happen in the next sign of Sagittarius, the return of confirmation, the return of unity to our spirit, to our spirituality. Okay, so let's think about this for one more second. The little deity we were talking about, the daimonic deity, was Leto, who was the mother of Apollo and Artemis, the sun and the moon, respectively. So there is this intermingling of solar significations, the one mind with the one thing, with substance, with inspiration, with substance, with soul, with body. And, Leto was the mother of those two things. And how are they moving back and forth between one another? Okay. How are they informing one another? And there may be this wrestling between those two before you come to the awareness of what needs to stay and what needs to go in your fermentation process. Now, the last thing we'll talk about this week is there is a square that's happening between Mercury retrograde in Libra now, and in Saturn in Capricorn at 9:29 p.m. And this is represented by the Four of Swords, that card of rest, and the Four of Pentacles, the card of power. Ren Butler talks about pessimistic thinking, working, attempts to maintain that equilibrium, right? We're going to have the moon escaping the bond around this time too, at 25 degrees of Taurus, pretty close to Algol. So be careful of that, I guess. It's around 7 o'clock, and it will trine Saturn. So the moon is going to be showing us what we are deprived of, or our limitations. And that may disturb our mental equilibrium a little bit. And we're going to have to try to bring that back into balance and question how we are bringing things into peace, how we're bringing harmony back into our worlds. And we may be, the lawyers in the cosmic courtroom, or think about it like this: the cosmic mind is having testimony from the lawyers right now about how we're going to bring balance and peace back into the situation of lack. And that may be a little confusing at first because Mercury is destabilizing that inner peace. So instead of getting thrown off your game, just observe the cosmic mind at this point. Observe the conversation that is manifesting through you, that is manifesting through the news, that is manifesting through the people in your life, and say, oh, look, there is Hermes giving a testimony to Saturn, right? And saying, all right, I'm going to see how we're going to reestablish this equilibrium while to the judge, to Saturn, who is going to also be involved with, like Nemesis, bringing things back into harmony, potentially through punishment, or potentially through giving what is due. Saturn gives what is due. It's not always a punishment, I don't think. If you've earned something, if you've done the hard work, Saturn will reward you for that hard work. I truly believe that. It gives what is due. What have you earned through your actions, the sun? It is part of the solar sect. Okay. So think about that as we experience the Mercury Saturn square on Sunday evening. All right, that's what we've got for this week. Looking ahead to next week on the 2nd of November through the 8th, Mercury is going to station direct on Tuesday, the 3rd of November at 25 degrees of Libra. That's election day. So I hope that you're all going out there and voting or have voted already. If you haven't, please do. It's a gift that you've been given in this democratic process. It's the next event or next step that you can take towards creating some of your idealistic visions on this plane. And if we don't get what we want from that, then we'll take the next steps. But that is the one first step that you have in your power, in your ability right now to do to create change and to get closer to your universal ideal. Even if the system itself is not where you want it to be, you have to take the one step. You have to take the one first step, and voting is that. So we will also see a number of fixed star conjunctions. The sun's going to conjoin the fixed star Acrux at 12 degrees of Scorpio on Tuesday. On Wednesday, the 4th, the sun's going to conjoin Alphecca at 12 degrees of Scorpio, and Venus will conjoin Diadem at 9 degrees of Libra. Thursday, the 5th, Venus is going to move into the second decan of Libra. We'll break that down. And Venus will conjoin Vindamayatrix at 11 degrees of Libra. On Friday, the 6th, the sun will conjoin Zubin El Janubi, and Mercury will square Saturn once again in its direct phase. On Saturday, the 7th, Venus is going to conjoin Algorab at 13 degrees of Libra. And then finally, on Sunday, the 8th, we'll experience the last quarter moon at 16 degrees of Leo and Scorpio, respectively. All right, everyone, that is what I have for you this week. Thank you so much for sticking with me. I really appreciate all of you. If you're enjoying these podcasts, these forecasts, this information, these teachings, please make sure you're subscribed to the channel below or wherever you're experiencing these. SoundCloud, Apple Podcasts, YouTube would be a great place to subscribe. Click that like button. Make sure you're commenting and let's have a conversation about how the planets are affecting you. If you want to support the work I'm doing materially, which is always very appreciated, there's donation links, there's a PayPal me link, or you can reach out for a reading. Remember, I'm offering a Mercury retrograde reading right now at a discounted rate, and that is a really fun reading that we could go and explore how Hermes wants to bring you some new realizations in your particular chart. So that's what I've got for this week. I hope that you're all doing well and that you're maintaining your equilibrium and your center. Please remember to go vote if you can. It is super important for the fabric of our democracy moving forward. And be kind to one another. We are all one country in America here, and we're a United States. Blue and red together make purple. So let's come together like Jupiter in his purple color, or like, I don't know, Prince or something, and party like it's 1999. Okay. I'll talk to y'all soon. Peace.